Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Happy October, which means Halloween's coming up. October is obviously the month to read all of the horror books, all of the thriller books, all of the creepy books. So today, that's what we're talking about. Horror, thriller, creepy, anything creepy. To get myself into the creepy mood, I've got pumpkins behind me, a ghosty behind me, I've got the creepy Halloween dress on. It's everything for Halloween. So it makes sense that I read a lot of thriller and horror books. So I've picked out all of my favourite thriller, horror, creepy books to read this Halloween. Okay, so first up we have thriller and psychological horror. And I think I'm firstly just gonna recommend an author that I've discovered that I really love. This year I started reading Katrina Ward's books and I've basically fallen in love. I think she's my favourite horror author at the moment. I've read 3 of her horror books, so nearly all of them. Okay, so I would actually recommend all 3 of her books. Last House on Needless Street, Sundial, and Looking Glass Sound. They're all very different story and plot-wise, and I think not everyone will like all of them. They're always very dark in themes. First of all, Last House on Needless Street is kind of a psychological, thrillery, whodunit, kind of like uncovering what's going on and surrounding a character who lives on this street nearby where a little girl went missing from a lake, I think. She's abducted. And it follows 3 different narrators. So the man and his daughter, and also the cat. The cat is a narrator. So that was very interesting to read. But everyone's kind of like unreliable. You don't really know what's going on, and it's so intriguing until you kind of get the big reveal of what's actually happening and the twist. I think there's only one twist really. There's like one major twist, and I think it's quite well done. A lot of people say that they see it coming, but I didn't see it coming, and I thought it was amazing. It blew my mind, and I think it was literally the first book of the year that I read, and I was like, wow, amazing. Don't know how I'm gonna beat this with anything, but it did get beaten by Sundial, also by Katrina Ward. I got through Sundial in like 2 days. I like cancelled all my plans on one Sunday just to be like, I need to finish this book. I have to understand what's going on. That's how addicted I was to it. So in Sundial, we follow Rob, who notices some strange things in her daughter. Essentially, kind of like she has the bones of animals on her wall, and different animals have been turning up dead around her neighborhood, and she kind of puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that something might be wrong with her daughter. And so she decides to take her to her childhood home called Sundial, where she grew up, and seems to think that the 2 are somehow related. This is all you kind of get at the beginning of the book, and then the book kind of it flicks to her past, Rob's past, and how she grew up, and also all of the kind of like family secret. It's quite a gothic kind of story. So we follow these 2 timelines, and as always with Katrina Ward, you think when you're reading from one perspective, you think that you're getting all the information, and then in the next perspective, everything you think you know will change. So everyone's unreliable. There's always more like secrets coming out and always more twists coming. I think there was multiple twists in this. I think more towards the latter half, but even towards the beginning there were twists and twists. So I think she's really good at kind of like making you think twice about things. It's got very creepy, isolated vibes because everything's taking place in the desert, and this house in the desert where it's miles and miles to the nearest other person, nearest neighbor. Yeah, and everything you think you're being told, it kind of changes in the next perspective. So intriguing. I was so gripped by this. I read it in 2 days. I thought it was amazing. Kind of has themes of like nature and nurture. I think in the author's note she says that. So if that's something you're interested in, or that kind of vibe, then definitely read this one. I do think with all these books you actually have to read the trigger warnings, because depending on what you're sensitive to, they're quite dark and they deal with a lot of things that are quite not great and not nice. Definitely check them out. And then Looking Glass Sound, which I read like a week after I read Sundial, because I was like, I just need to read another one. Looking Glass Sound. So it follows Wilder, who's writing his memoir about his childhood in this beach town where there was this kind of creepy figure who would go in and take pictures of people while they were sleeping, called the Dagger Man, and his memoir kind of like focuses on that. And also his friend who stole the memoir and published it as his own, so he's kind of gone back to this town, kind of writing his memoir. So you get bits, it's kind of like a book within a book. You read kind of Wilder's memoir that he's written and excerpts from his friend's book that he got published, which is his stolen memoir. So you read bits of that and you kind of get all the pieces to this story. So the first half is kind of like the coming of age tale, where you get to know him and his group of friends that he has, and these kind of like just things that they do, the summers that they had together. And then, you know, things get bad. Things get bad, and I feel like that's all I'm gonna say on that bit without giving too many spoilers away. But this one is full of turns again and again and again. I think probably from like maybe like 30 when you get 30% or 50% in, something like that. That's kind of when the like coming of age bit stops, and then that's when the kind of like twists and turns start happening. But there were so many different confusing bits in this, like the twists and turns. As I've said before, everything you think you know isn't true in Katrina Ward books. But that made me like it more. I thought it was really like mind-bending and confusing, and you were like, what the actual heck is going on here? It's kind of like a WTF is going on, but in a good way. That's exactly how I describe this book. But yeah, it's one that I would love, that I think would be good as a reread as well, because I've just finished it, but I also really want to reread it now, just because of once you finish a Katrina Ward book, you kind of need to go back and look at it again and everything changes. So yeah, I basically recommend everything that Katrina Ward has ever written. Keeping with kind of like the gothic kind of vibes, one that I think is a bit lighter in horror. It's not as like horror thrillery. I feel like when I read it, or what I remember of it, it's quite lighter in its themes but still a bit creepy, which is The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. So this essentially follows two different timelines. We have a mother who is moving to paint a mural in this lighthouse with her 3 kids, and this lighthouse was once used to like hold witches who were accused of witchcraft in past times, and I think the witches were killed. So obviously bad witchy vibes there. And then at some point, some of the family go missing, and in the present day, one of the sisters, Luna, gets a phone call, and someone is like, "Hi, we found your sister, your 7-year-old sister, who was 7 when she went missing, but now 20 years later, she's still 7, and she's just turned up." So what's going on there? Like, you're instantly intrigued by that. I don't think anything was that scary in it, but I remember being quite creeped out and being like, what is actually going on here? This is craziness going on. And I really liked how there were different twists and how everything married up at the end. I liked the way that I think it had a really good like kind of like ending. It had a good ending and a good twist that made the ending good. So it's kind of like creepy but also witchy, and also this mystery of like what happened, what's going on, who is this child, all these different things going on in these 2 timelines. But I remember being hooked on this book. So yeah, if you like creepy witchy vibes, definitely give this a read. And then if you like chaotic horror where everything gets a bit crazy, I'd say read The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. This essentially follows a group of writers who are invited to this writing retreat with this kind of like iconic feminist horror writer who wrote like a series of different bestseller books. These writers go on this retreat and they meet this iconic writer, and she seems just as, you know, a little bit weird, like someone who writes like weird horror books would be. And then, you know, things get weird, things get chaotic, there's a murder, there's mystery, there's what the hell's going on. They're snowed in, very isolated setting because they're snowed in, can't go anywhere. This body turns up. It's crazy. I'd say it's chaos. Chaos ensues. This is another one that I sped through because I was like, I need to know what's going on here after reading multiple twists and turns about what was happening. And then if you like slasher films, if slasher films are your thing, I'd recommend The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, because I feel like this one's kind of like, you either love it or you hate it. But I feel like if you like slasher films, you'll like this book because it has that kind of like the slasher film vibe, like slightly campy, slightly weird. Like you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit for the things that are happening in it. Like it's not exactly rooted in reality in a sense. Everything's a little bit exaggerated. So it follows a kind of, in the title, the final girls who are in this support group. They're all different kind of ages. So some of them, it's been like 20 years since they were the final girl of their thing. So we follow a different group, but we have one main character who is quite paranoid about someone trying to get her, and actually it turns out someone is after her and all of the people in their group. Another one which is chaotic. I think this one is even more chaotic, but if you like slasher films and that kind of chaotic vibe, I'd say check this one out. And then for my supernaturally kind of paranormally creepy books, the first one is Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall, and I was obsessed with this book. This is like a YA horror following a group of teenagers who play this game based around this kind of like old ghost tale that you go into the woods and you find this girl who went missing years and years and years ago, and it's kind of like this the little horror ghost tale of the town. And one of the girl's sisters has gone missing and she thinks that she's disappeared in this woods. So her and a bunch of other people, friends and other teenagers, all go to this mysterious road and they find it, and it's very, very creepy. This is like one of the only books that I wouldn't listen to at night. I tried to listen to it at night and I was like, no, it's too creepy. And I feel like I never really actually do that. But this one I was like, I'm gonna switch the light on while I listen to this book. It's kind of also in this really interesting found footage kind of style. The way it's done is it's kind of different bits of evidence. So you have like testimonies and then you have video footage, which kind of plays around with the concept of time in the whole story that you're getting, and how some things aren't actually very true. It's very clever in the way that it plays around with the time, essentially, that all these events happen in. So it's really cleverly done, I'd say, which I think I was quite impressed with for a YA horror, because of I think sometimes they can be a bit like just basic, but I thought this one was actually really cleverly done. Okay, and then next up, I'd recommend all of T. Kingfisher's horror books because I've read most of them, but the one that I'd recommend most is The Hollow Places, because it's the first one I read and it's the one I loved the most, I think. So we essentially follow a woman, Cara, or Carrot is her nickname. I think the blurbs have different names on. I think it confuses people sometimes, but her name's Cara and her nickname is Carrot that she's given by like her uncle. So she goes and stays with her uncle, who I think needs some help with his little museum of like oddities and different things and slightly strange oddities and things like that. And while she's staying there, something happens. While she's staying there, she comes across this kind of like bunker room that leads to this different kind of dimension. Weird, creepy things ensue. This one really creeped me out. It doesn't give you too much, so there's almost this sense of unknown that is creepier than actually knowing everything about what's going on, which I think fear of the unknown is like a massive thing in horror, isn't it? Like when you're scared of something, it's kind of that unknown of, oh my god, what is it? Who knows what it is? I think that's more creepy sometimes. If you like that and you like creepy alternate dimensions, don't know what's going on, this is one for you. But I'd also recommend all of T. Kingfisher's books. What Moves the Dead, which is kind of like an Edgar Allan Poe retelling of, I can't remember the name, I'll write it. And also A House with Good Bones, which is kind of like a gothic gothic haunted house kind of story, and The Twisted Ones, which is also incredibly creepy. Okay, and then another one which is creepy and kind of like, hang on, what's going on, what's real, what's not, and that's Jackal by Erin E. Adams. It follows a woman who goes back to her hometown, and at her friend's wedding, her friend's daughter goes missing in the woods, where she notices there's a trend of girls that go missing, and she's seen something like it before when she lived there and when she was younger, and so she feels this kind of like, one, her friend's daughter's gone missing, and two, she also has this kind of connection to it and from someone else that had gone missing when she was younger and lived there. It's quite it's a bit of a slow build up, but then once things get going, they really get going. There's like twists and you don't really know what's going on. It kind of mixes as past and present and things that have happened in the past and how they relate to the future, and very well done, I'd say. Very, very creepy. Very creepy, and everything kind of comes together at the end and you kind of see all of these events and how they're linked, and it's kind of a mix of horror and also mystery. So you're kind of like figuring out what's going on in this immediate mystery and kind of like the bigger overall. And then for some shorter reads, so some novellas that I've read that I really enjoyed, Come Closer by Sarah Gran, which is quite like a slow and almost mundane kind of look at this woman who is slowly becoming possessed by a demon. Kind of this interesting take of her herself recognizing that she is being possessed by a demon and being like, hang on, what's going on, am I? And reading this kind of list, which is actually quite creepy when it's like someone being quite aware that they might be possessed by a demon, rather than usually it's like the outsider perspective of, oh, this person's possessed, they're acting like this. Like, what if it's you who's possessed and you know you're possessed, or you have a feeling you're possessed? That's very creepy to me. The other one is Crossroads by Laurel Hightower, which is a exploration of grief as well as how far someone will go to get back a loved one, and kind of like the horrific things that come from that. It's quite short, so I don't want to say too much, but that's essentially what it explores. Also very creepy and very eerie. And those are my thriller and horror and creepy books that I recommend for October, and also just whenever you want to read creepy horror thriller books. These are the ones that I think that I've read that I would recommend. One category that I realised I don't have much experience reading is like monster horror. I think I have a few that I want to read on my TBR, but they're kind of like scattered around. I don't think it's something that I generally pick up a lot. So if you have any monster horror recommendations for me that you've read or that you think sound good, or based on the things that I've recommended here that you think I might like, please tell me, as someone that likes to read horror, to give myself an all-rounded horror reading. But yeah, that's all of them. Let me know what books you would recommend for October and Halloween and creepy season. And also, what are you reading? Do you have any recommendations for me? Let me know. And I'm still working my way through all of my thriller and horror books that I'll be reading. I did a video about my autumn TBR, so there's quite a few in there. There's a mix of like horror, thriller, fantasy, literary fiction. So if you want to check that out, feel free to. You can see what I'm planning on reading. So that's all from me. Hope everyone has a lovely October. See you next time. Bye.